Hey guys, welcome back to a Slice of Empathy podcast. It's been a minute. It's been almost, I was just looking at the calendar, it's been almost 2 months since I've come out with an episode, and yeah, it's just been difficult. As I mentioned in my previous episode, I've been struggling with a lot of burnout and had a lot of things going on, so I just decided this summer to just take an opportunity to just focus on like what we're doing and enjoying the summer and being able to get things done. And it came to my attention that I had a few people ask about, when are you going to be putting out your next podcast? So I was feeling honestly a little guilty, and it's not that I don't want to do it, it's just like things have been crazy, and with work and donating plasma on the side and vacations and whatnot, and just like regular life stuff. But yeah, so in this episode we're going to kind of get into talking about our first few years really being on our own again in Sacramento and learning a new area and all of that. So in 2015, I believe it was February, we rented a 1-bedroom apartment that was $825 that had a in-unit washer and dryer and a central AC, which is unheard of in the Bay Area for any of you who may live there. And if they do have it, it's considered luxury, and it's like probably $2,500 a month or more. Since I think, what was it, back in 2015, since 2015, about 8 years ago now, those same apartments I think are probably going close to $2,000 now. It's like crazy how much like the costs have gone up in the area since we've moved, since we've been here. And I'm kind of glad that we moved here when we did, because now it's not, I feel like it's not too much different than the Bay Area. It's still like cheaper for sure. Like, we were able to buy a house for like a little bit under $400,000, which is still a lot compared to like those of you who live in other states and whatnot, where cost of living is so much cheaper, right? But yeah, so it was actually a pretty nice apartment compared to what we were used to, because when we lived in the Bay Area, we were paying like on average $1,500 a month, and I think like half of the places we lived in didn't have any AC. It would get really hot during the summer. One place didn't have a dishwasher. I don't think any of the units had a in-unit washer and dryer. And that was the nice thing about moving to where we did. Although, like, after living in that complex for like 6 years, I'm like, okay, I'm done with renting. And there was a point in time we were considering maybe renting a house, but with everything like that went on the last couple of years, like at the housing shortage and the housing crisis, rentals were becoming like really competitive. So I'm like, okay, well, that's probably not really an option. So then we really started seriously looking at buying a house after like 2020, but we'll get there in a future episode. But yeah, so we lived in this complex. It was a small apartment. I think we wanted a larger unit, but that was what was available at the time. So I'm like, okay, if the price is right. We weren't making a whole lot of money at that moment in time. So I'm like, okay, well, this fits our budget. And like we moved in there, and it wasn't so bad. But yeah, it was a little bit cramped. I think it was like the size of one of the first apartments we lived at when we first moved out together years ago. So yeah, it was like a little bit cramped, because at one point we were living in like a 2-bedroom apartment that was like 1,000 square feet, and this was like 650. It doesn't seem like a huge difference, but yeah, like we had to downsize anyway when we first relocated. But yeah, so yeah, it was interesting. For the first year or so when we moved up to Sacramento, I think we drove back, I think at least once a month, maybe twice a month, for my orthodontic treatment. And we had to go during the week, which made it really difficult with, trying to find a job and having to take off time from said job and whatever to go and get the treatment, because it's like, Monday through Friday. So what it ended up doing is later on I ended up having I think it was in 2015, I think it had been 2.5 years at this point, I ended up having my braces removed a little bit early, it was about like 80, maybe 85% completed. And at that point in time, I'm like, no, I'm done. I don't want to do this again. I don't want to go through having braces again. Like, because that was my second time having braces. So I'm like, no, I don't want to do this again. And, fast forward several years later, we ended up getting Invisalign because I wasn't a candidate for Invisalign, unfortunately, the second time I had braces because I had some bite issues. But I was able to do Invisalign this last time, and it was only for like 6 months. And so it was a little bit more of a breeze in comparison, just because there were a couple of cosmetic issues I was having with my front teeth that I'm like, okay, if I can do Invisalign, let's see how much it is and whatnot. And my my orthodontia with work is actually pretty decent. I think that it covered a good chunk of my treatment. But anyway, yeah, more about that a little bit later on. So yeah, early 2015, I was working at my job the pizza place. I was working 30 hours a week. And the hope was to eventually go full time. And when I first started there, it was, like a hybrid schedule, partially in the office, partially working from home. I honestly, looking back at it, I have very bittersweet, is it bittersweet? Kind of a love-hate relationship. I still to this day have mixed feelings. They gave me a goodbye party and everything and wished me well. But, I'll kind of get into why I had mixed feelings about that particular job. There's things I loved about it, things I didn't love so much. And I think, I don't know, maybe that goes for really any job. But yeah, so one of my coworkers who later became a good friend of mine, was doing some of the social media at the position, and she was going on maternity leave, and the hope was that I would take over for her when she was out. Granted, I don't think I was like paid extra or anything like that, which in hindsight I probably should have because I was taking on additional work. And yeah, so what the hope is that I would basically succeed her when she was on maternity leave, and I think she was kind of moving more into like a PR position, and they were looking to maybe offset some of the social media work. So basically, on her maternity leave, I basically took over planning content, and I think it went pretty well, but it was kind of like more like they were just seeing like if it was a good fit, like if I'd be good at it kind of thing. But here's the real kicker. The thing that really bothered me, one of the presidents at the company had brought in his kids to do some of the job functions. And his daughter took over the social media piece. And, I get it. If you're in a position to be able to help your kids and give them that start in life, to be able to, get experience and whatnot, I totally, I get it. But here, I had a bachelor's degree and several years of experience in social media and content marketing, and I was in my mid-20s at this early to mid-20s at this point, and his daughter was 16, and she wasn't even graduated from high school yet, and he wanted her to take over social media. And I think it was kind of I don't know if she was getting paid or whatever. It was an intern thing for her. But yeah, it's just, there was a lot of nepotism. I think that was one of the things that I did not like. Very cliquey, and just kind of felt like you had to, if you didn't like everyone there, you just didn't fit, or if you didn't hang out on the weekends together, you didn't fit, and I am very much someone who sure, I love, making and developing relationships with people and at work and colleagues and, all of that. But I think what I really like about my current job is it's very much about the work-family life balance. I have a great time when I'm working and with the people I work with, But on my off time, I focus on like things outside of work, friends and family and whatnot. Not to say that I haven't made some good friends as a result of my workplace, because I have. But, yeah, I just think that it just felt kind of like very cliquey, very high school. If you know, you know. And I think that kind of bothered me. I felt like I kind of had to be someone that I wasn't to like fit in. And they would have these things like called like Pho Fridays, which, pho like is like a noodle soup, like a Vietnamese noodle soup, if you don't know. And some of the gals in the office would get together on those like every other Friday or something like that and have pho. And it was kind of like, I felt like it was kind of unspoken. Like, we weren't sure if it was like just them having pho together or if like it was meant for everyone. And after a period of time, I kind of started realizing that, like, sometimes people, like other people in the office, were included in Pho Fridays, and some people weren't. And mostly that, like, this included people in, like, the upper administration and HR and stuff like that having Pho Fridays because we had a full-size kitchen in the office. So sometimes took part of it, but it was kind of like, oh, like, are the rest of us included? So, like, I don't know. It was just kind of... I don't know, like, I just kind of got the vibe that, like, it was mostly just, like, for them most of the time. Although I will say our company, the CEO, he was really nice. Like, I don't have a bad thing to say about him at all. He was always really nice. And I think I know, like, a lot of popular buzzwords when it comes to, like, working in different types of work environments, and some of the like toxic things to be aware of is like, oh, we're like a family, apparently that could be a red flag when you're applying for different positions. And if like the job description's like, oh, we're like a family, like it could kind of insinuate maybe there's like, long hours worked or certain expectations and just things like that. But at the time, like, I didn't know this, and I just kind of, oh, that's kind of nice, like, I mean, I feel like there's good and bad. I feel like the owner had, like, offered up, I think, like, his storage where we could store some of our furniture temporarily, like, things like that, like, very generous things. He would have holiday parties at his house. He had a very, very, very nice house that they would host holiday parties at every single year. And those are really, really cool and stuff like that. And, but yeah, I think also, like, when it kind of, I feel like you can't advocate for yourself as much if something's bothering you, similar to, like, when you're working in an environment, like I did with a previous position where I felt like there was, like, unprofessionalism and kind of, like, maybe sexual harassment going on in the workplace, in one of my previous jobs, and I just, you feel like, okay, well, what are my options here, so like, an HR, and there was an HR in this company, and I think I did bring up a concern at one point, feeling like, I mean, there was things that I learned. I mean, there was things that I definitely think helped me grow as a person. I mean, one of which being, not being such a yes person, and not really communicating if I'm confused, but maybe I'd look confused, or they couldn't tell, like, how I was feeling about something. That manager would tell me, he's like, oh, we never really know what you're thinking. You always, like, look the same. And I mean, it's funny. I get people who comment on the fact that, like, oh, are you always happy? You smiling too much? But then I also get people who comment like, oh, you just, like, basically have a resting poker face. Like, we just don't know what you're thinking. Like, and so I'm like, and that's kind of what I felt. I just kind of felt like I had to be someone who I just wasn't. I don't know. Like, generally, I'm an Enneagram 5, Wing 4, for any of you guys who do Enneagrams. So my nature is pretty, like, reserved and quiet. Although once you get to know me, I can be really lively and just, like, have a great time and all that stuff. But I don't know. I didn't feel like I can entirely be myself. Like, for example, at my current position, like, I like the fact that, I could just walk into my office, say hi to the admins, and then just like start working on whatever it is I'm working on. Now, at my previous job, I always just kind of felt like I had to talk about like my weekend, everything that went on all the time, and I was working earlier. So part of it is in the morning, I'm not a morning person. I was just tired a lot, and I just wanted to like kind of wake up, and yeah, so and that was tough. And I think another thing that I look back on now was the fact that when I was working from home, I had to use my own computer. Like when I went to the office, I had a work computer, but I didn't have a computer to work at home with. And we later on, a few months after I started this job, they had this software that would basically, instead of I think this was in lieu of like regular timesheets, that would basically videotape your screen like throughout the entire duration of when you're working. Now you can work at odd times or whatever, but like if your screen was idle for more than a couple of minutes, they'd bring attention to it, things like that. So I just kind of felt like it was like micromanagement, but from like afar. And they had the same software at I forget what the name of it was. They had the same one that you use at their computers at the office too. I hated it. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like you should be able to trust your employees and what they're doing. I think that was part of the reason why I ended up, like one of the many reasons I decided to move on. I think that the biggest reason was that I was promised full time and it just wasn't happening. When my coworker came back from maternity leave, the other gal, the like one of the president's daughters, she started taking over social media. And so I was there for a total of a year and a half. I was only working 30 hours. I didn't get any vacation time or sick. Well, I got a California mandated sick time, which I believe is like a guaranteed 3 days of sick time. I'm not sure if it's changed since then, but otherwise I wouldn't get sick time or vacation time. I didn't have benefits. And I wasn't full time, and I felt like I was underpaid. So those are like the top couple of reasons why I ended up having to move on. Because when initially I was hoping to go full time, and maybe I would have stuck around, and that wasn't happening. And I'm like, okay, I think it was like 6 months in. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm probably just gonna have to start looking around. I remember I did get, I got a raise 6 months or a year in. It was like a 7% raise, and they basically told me that like I wasn't gonna get that kind of raise again. And I'll just be honest, I was only making like 14 something an hour. And to be told like, yeah, this is pretty much it. Like it's gonna be 3%, like here on out, like, that basically that's like the only time I'm gonna get a 7% raise. And mind you, again, like I had a college degree, and I was underpaid and only like not even full time, no benefits or nothing. So I'm like, okay, I gotta start looking around for something else. And it took me about a year of like actively applying and looking around for a new opportunity, and I finally found one with a nonprofit. And it's funny, I remember when they were like having my goodbye party, because again, like there were things I did really like about the job. I mean, I think everyone was just really nice. I just didn't like the nepotism and kind of the cliques and things like that that were kind of going on, and just aside from being like underpaid and all of that. And I remember one of the I don't remember what his title was, but one of the upper administration people was like, I think he was in accounting. He was like, oh, you're going to work for a nonprofit? Like, are you sure you're going to get paid enough? And like, I was like inwardly thinking, I'm like, I'm making like double of what I was making there, like full time with benefits and vacation and all of that, and like a huge raise. And so that's what I was thinking. Like, I didn't tell him that, but I'm like, oh yeah, it's a really good company. And I just left it at that. But like, and I think a lot of people, when they hear, oh, you're going to work at a nonprofit, you're not going to get paid much, da da da. And no, it ended up being a really great opportunity. Fast forward, I've been there over 7 years now. So obviously it was a great move at the time, and I can't believe it's been so long. And I remember they invited me to come back to visit, but I never did. And part of me, I think a lot of it was just time, like with my where I was currently working, and business hours, and the location of my past job or whatever. It just hadn't really worked out. But I think also part of it was because of all these mixed feelings that I kind of have with leaving that job. Like, it wasn't really on my priority list. And I don't know, like sometimes I just kind of like, I don't know, like, is it out of obligation? Like, there's things I really liked about that job, sure. But I also, at the same time, don't have any desire really to go back. I don't know. Like, I mean, I do and I don't. I don't know if that makes sense. I've been someone who would go back to previous jobs and visit and say hi to people I worked with. And even when I went to school, like, I would go say, hi to past teachers. And it was just kind of, it was cool to just for them to see like how I was doing now and whatnot. But yeah, I think to this day, like, and it still crossed my mind, oh, should I go back and pay a visit? I mean, it's been so many years now. I mean, I don't know. I guess if it happens to be really convenient, I'm in the area or something, then maybe I will. But they also had like white elephant parties that were really fun. Again, there was things that I did really genuinely enjoy. And I may have mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'm part of the Yelp Elite program. So I actually connected my previous boss with our Yelp Elite manager, who organizes these events for publicity. And I think they ended up, giving me like a gift card, like a small gift card as like for thanks for being part of the event. But I don't know, other than that, like making the connection, I felt like I wasn't given as much credit as I should have been given for such a big publicity event. I don't know if I even was really included in a lot of it. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they've given me a gift card later, but I don't know. I don't know. I just felt like I wasn't really a big part of it for someone who was like, that was pretty much my idea. But yeah, I'd made a good work friend while I was working there. As I said, she was the one who was on maternity leave and was doing kind of like the social media and PR at the time. And we became good friends because we would go to different locations and do PR and stuff like that. And she had ended up later giving me a reference for my current job. And yeah, like, I was really thankful for her. And I think shortly after I moved on, I think she had moved away. She had actually been friends with the president of the company. So I feel like a lot of people who worked there were either friends of like some of the higher ups or family members. I don't know, I was probably one of the few exceptions, except for one of the IT guys. But yeah, I think it was like something that really bothered us. Like, I understand, like, it's a good way for your kids to get like experience and whatnot. But for those of us who've like really had to work like really hard to get a degree and experience in order to have these positions, it's like, yeah. But yeah, so I remember when I left and I took my current job, I remember people were like, oh, are you going to take a week off in between? And like, I wish I could have had the means to do that, but like, I was already so underpaid. I didn't have vacation time, nothing. And I think my husband had just gotten laid off at his job at that point in time, so I had needed to start this job like yesterday. At that point, like, I needed to have started yesterday. So that was a no-go. And I guess it kind of bothered me. Like, I'd see folks, like, being able to, like, go on vacations and trips, and it's just like, oh, yeah, okay. Can't really do that because I'm so underpaid and I don't get vacation time. And it was just really kind of hard to deal with. And now, looking back after having had the opportunity to have traveled since I've been at my current workplace, I'm like, my one regret is not having traveled more when I was younger. It just wasn't really an option, just for so many different reasons. I mean, I'm sure you guys can piece it together based on the previous episodes, but like, we were just, for so many years, we were just struggling to pay rent and go to school and have a part-time job. And so it just wasn't, yeah, like, we were just like trying to like survive. And, yeah, it just wasn't feasible at that time. Yeah, so the full-time thing didn't work out, and I ended up having to find another job. Worked out though, so everything happens for a reason. But yeah, my husband had been laid off, and then he had started up another job about a month or so into my new job, where he was there for about 6 months. They were super micromanagey. They had cameras everywhere. So like, and he said that it was really hard because there was a lot of times where like you're just like super bored and there wasn't anything to do. And he's like, well, it's like, you have cameras watching your back and people micromanaging your calls and all that. And fast forward, like, it ended up not working out. I think he ended up quitting because, like, I think one of the issues was that if you requested time off, they wouldn't tell you until like a day or two before said time off, which obviously is not realistic to be able to plan anything. Like, what if you bought airplane tickets or something that's like not refundable? Or, I don't know, there's like visiting relatives or something like that, and you need to plan ahead. And it reminded me so much, when he would tell me about it, it would remind me so much of retail. And eventually I think he just got to his wit's end, and he ended up just like, he just had to quit, like, without notice. And they gave him a going away party too, to his surprise, because he's like, he felt like he didn't leave on the best of terms, just because he's like, he just got so frustrated with like being micromanaged. And when you ask for time off, like, you'd never know, and then like the holidays and your days off, you'd never know. Like, this is like, for people working in the office, like, you're working 8 to 5, like, that should not be an issue. Like, I can understand, like, if you're working in an environment that's very fast paced and you need coverage and things like that, even like retail, I can understand to a degree. But even then, you should be able to know your schedule at least a week or two ahead of time, like what your work schedule is. So that became an issue. And so the next thing, so this was like 6 months later, and what he decided to do was do Uber and Lyft full time. And that meant getting, like renting a vehicle or buying a vehicle, because I think it had, your car had to be 4-door, it had to be 2004 or newer. I don't know what the standards are today. He doesn't do it anymore. But at that particular period of time, he's like, okay, well, he was just so, and understandably, like, disenfranchised with the employment market and the bad experiences. He's like, okay, basically going to work for himself. And he did that for a good couple of years. So for about 2.5 years, he did that full time. And I'll be honest, it was not an easy time for either of us. Like, he was overworked and stressed. There was a lot of expenses that came with that. And I remember, I don't know if they have this program still, but Uber at one point had a rental car program where you could rent a car specifically for doing Uber. And I think it was, I don't know, depending on how much you did it, it was pretty expensive though. It was like $700 a month, and like, depending on how much you make for Uber. I mean, so long story short, I had gone down south for my company, so I was gone for the day. And my husband was looking into that, like the rental car program. And what ends up happening is I get back and he tells me that, like, he ended up buying or financing a car, like, outright, and hadn't talked to me about it. And for a while, I felt like kind of resentful because I'm like, we're married. This is such a large purchase. This is something that we should have discussed, and especially he had never done Uber before. He didn't really have an idea of how much he was going to make. I think the car payment. I mean, it does end up being cheaper to like pay a car payment versus paying for the rental program. But still, at that point in time, it should have been a discussion. I just came home. Oh, I bought a car. Like, oh, okay. Well, you didn't talk to me about this. I thought you were just renting a car to do Uber and Lyft. So it stayed with me for a while. And about a year later, I think my husband had gotten in an accident while doing Uber and Lyft because he would drive to San Francisco and back most days. I think at least at least probably 6 days a week. And he was gone for probably about 12 hours a day, like very overworked. And that led to a lot of struggles and relationship issues down the way, which I will get to. But so I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, that should have been something that we discussed, I mean, that's a huge purchase, even though I understand why you're doing it. That's a huge expense that affects us both, right? And he started doing it full time, and I think he was doing it in the area for a while, and then he started driving down to the Bay Area because that's like a big hub. That's where a lot of that's where it was centralized. I mean, it's just not as busy here in Sacramento. He hasn't done it since 2019, so it's probably has changed since then. But it was just where you would get the most business and you'd get paid more. You would have to have a fast track and all that. But yeah, a lot of that time, I remember over time he'd grown increasingly frustrated because in a way it's sort of like working with retail, working with the public, I mean, some customers are really nice, some others were not so nice, and he'd always have stories for me on a daily basis, some not so good and some not so bad. I think one time someone gave him $100 tip and which was really nice. But yeah, there also there are some people that weren't very nice, that would slam your door or I don't know, or get drunk and try to hug him or kiss him or things like that. And I trusted him and stuff like that. Yeah, he was open with me about that, and just some crazy stories. I've been thinking about doing I don't know, a YouTube about it with him sometime. Maybe we'll do that. But so that was so that was kind of difficult. And so with him doing that, mind you, I may have mentioned in a previous episode that I got my license when I was 22. And I didn't really drive, even though I got my license, I didn't really drive too much up until this point. And a lot of which was because we only had one car. We finally had gotten two cars. And in order for my husband to be able to do this, that means I would have to be able, to drive around more because he wasn't going to be around a lot. And looking back, I think it was probably something that I needed at that time to grow as a person, to really grow and spread my wings, so to speak. Because looking back, I'm that was the catalyst for me, being comfortable and even enjoying driving now, because I had so much anxiety around it, and it really just it stopped me. And I was in a position to where I hardly saw my husband. I hardly saw him. I was doing a lot of things by myself, to an extent to which I got used to, but also it was kind of lonely. And yeah, it was kind of lonely. And then he had, of course, expenses that would go along with doing Uber and Lyft. So I think after one of the cars was totaled, it was totaled a year later, didn't have gap insurance. And there's another story with that one as well. Didn't have gap insurance, which means because of the high mileage on the car, he ended up owing like 12 grand after the insurance paid out the value of the car. So I ended up owing money. And thankfully we were able to write that off because that vehicle was primarily used for business. But yeah, it really kind of sucked. Because it was pretty much, it was a total loss. And let's see. Yeah, it was just a major shift for us. And you'd work long hours. And I think around this point, I had learned of my friend who worked at my previous job. She had moved away to help her husband, who I think his mom was sick. And about, I don't know, like a year or so later, I came to learn, I think through Facebook, and we had a couple of mutual friends, that she had passed away from medical complications. And to this day, like, I still wonder, like, what happened. And I know it's not something that's socially appropriate or acceptable to ask, but she was like only in her early 30s. And just all of a sudden, one day she went to the doctor or went to the hospital for something, and then because of complications, she passed away. And this was back in 2017, like 6 years ago. And looking back, I'm like, I still don't know what happened, but it was rough. It's still to this day, like she just had a really good impact on my life, and she vouched for me, helped me, get my current position and all that. And we stayed friends even after I left my previous position. And it was, that was difficult. And it was like around that time, just like, that I felt like everything was just becoming so stressful. I think I'm going to probably leave us there, because we're almost at 40 minutes, and I said I'd probably keep this episode to about 30 minutes. So I think I'm going to leave you guys with that, because there's a lot more coming, and I feel like I can articulate that better in the next episode. But I love hearing your guys' feedback, and it just warms my heart knowing that you guys look forward to these podcasts, because sometimes I'm like, I get that imposter syndrome. I don't know, like, hopefully people are enjoying this and stuff, right? But yeah, I love hearing your guys' feedback and thoughts, and I appreciate you guys sticking with me and listening through my rambles. But yeah, guys, hopefully I will see you, or you'll hear from me soon. Within the next couple weeks. I'm going to be headed off to Minneapolis for an X-Files convention. So this podcast may go up, hopefully before it, by the end of the month. I think the last day of the month is on Friday. So hopefully that's going to go up. And the following week I'll be in Minneapolis for an X-Files convention. Super excited about that. Been a long time coming. But yeah, guys, take care, and I will see you guys in my next podcast. Bye.